I would like to introduce Hazel Malapit, the Senior Research Coordinator of the Poverty, Health, and Nutrition Division of IFPRI, based in the United States.
This morning, we already heard about gender from the morning panel, so I'm really excited to talk to you today about gender equality to accelerate the achievement of SDG 2. So can it do that? Can gender equality accelerate the achievement of SDG 2? I think the answer is yes. A recent IFPRI study by Agnes Kisumbing and colleagues found that greater equality between women and men within households was associated with better nutrition outcomes, especially in Bangladesh, Nepal, and Cambodia. So this suggests that nutrition-sensitive agricultural programs that also aim to reduce intra-household inequalities could have greater impacts than those that do not. So this is just one recent example out of a growing body of evidence that documents the linkages between SDG 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment and SDGs 2 and 3, eliminating poverty, achieving zero hunger and malnutrition, and good health and well-being for women and children. So promoting gender equality and women's empowerment has the potential for unlocking a virtuous cycle, enabling women to advocate for their own needs and for the needs of their children can help direct resources towards nutritious food and other health inputs. So the question is, how can we address gender to take advantage of the potential synergies between gender equality and nutrition outcomes? So to understand how we can achieve impact, we first need to know how our interventions are supposed to work. So how will change happen? What chain of events have to occur to get at better nutrition for our target populations? So interventions in agriculture can influence nutrition in several ways. So first, agriculture is of course a source of food. It's a source of income, and then food prices influence the decisions around what households can spend on, including nutritious food and health inputs. All of these influence food and nutrient intakes and overall diet quality for mothers and young children. Now notice those yellow boxes on the chart. 3 out of the 6 pathways focus specifically on women, which highlights how women's empowerment is critical to children's nutrition. So women's empowerment influences who in the household participates in agricultural programs, what types of technologies are adopted, what crops are grown, what animals are raised. And this has consequences for what's consumed at home, what's sold in the market, and who eats what. Now, depending on how physically taxing women's roles are in agriculture, particularly during pregnancy and lactation, this could also have implications on women's own health and nutrition, positive or negative, and this can be passed on to their children. Women's participation in agriculture can also influence women's time use, which of course, because of their gendered role as primary care providers, has consequences for food preparation and caring practices for young children. But gender is not just about women. Let me repeat that. Gender is not just about women. Gender is a social relationship between women and men. It's their socially determined roles, responsibilities, resources, and constraints. And so what we call gender norms are the rules that govern what it is that women and men can and cannot do, what decisions and areas of life are in their domain. So while the 3 pathways have a special focus on women, in fact, all of the pathways are shaped by gender. Now, understanding the pathways and how they're linked is important for finding out whose behavior we want to change and how. And it can also help us anticipate the ways that our interventions might result in unintended consequences. We already heard about trade-offs earlier. So for example, interventions that intensify women's participation in agriculture might improve household income, but ignoring how women's workloads might be shifting could also result in negative impacts on nutrition. Now, understanding the pathways of impact and where gender fits in is the first step. But next, we need to figure out how do we want to address gender? What is our goal? Are we trying to reach women, benefit women, or empower women? Reaching women means including women in our program activities. Benefiting women means increasing women's well-being in specific ways, improving their income, diets, health outcomes, and so on. Empowering women means strengthening women's ability to make important decisions and act on them. So simply including women in project activities does not necessarily benefit them, and even when women benefit, they are not necessarily empowered. So distinguishing between reaching women, benefiting women, and empowering women is important because each of these goals will require a different set of strategies and activities, and therefore a different set of indicators for tracking progress. So, for example, consider a project promoting a nutritious crop that's disseminated through agricultural extension services to farmer groups. So if the goal is to reach women, this would mean delivering the extension services to women farmers. Now, how would you do that? If transportation for women was a problem, then it may need to provide transportation. Trainings may need to be conducted in places where women can easily go and scheduled during times of the day that are convenient for them. To track progress on our reach, it would make sense to collect indicators on participation, like how proportions of women attending trainings or receiving extension advice. If the goal was to benefit women, this would mean increasing women's well-being in specific ways. And that means that the project activities will need to consider women's preferences and constraints. So it's not just about getting women to the training. The content of the training itself must be designed with the women's needs in mind. And then to track progress on how well we're benefiting women, we would need to collect data on the well-being outcomes we care about: land use, yields, income, consumption, nutrition, time use, and so on. Now, if we want to be able to say that women farmers and men farmers are benefiting equally from this intervention, then we need to collect sex disaggregated data so we can compare benefits that accrue to women with benefits that accrue to men. Now, if the goal is to empower, then this would mean increasing women's agency over production and nutrition outcomes. So to empower women, you need something more than just reach and benefit. You need to find ways to enhance women's find ways to enhance women's decision-making power over their households and communities, particularly on which crops to grow, because this example is for a crop project. So empowerment doesn't just happen by accident. You need to design the project to make that happen. It needs to be baked into the program. And then to track progress on empowerment, you need to measure decision-making power around different aspects of empowerment, such as decisions over production, income and food production, as well as information on gender-based violence and time burdens, which is where those unintended consequences tend to appear. So a project that claims to empower women but is only including women as beneficiaries cannot expect to have an impact on empowerment if its activities are insufficient to help beneficiaries make strategic life choices. But if we want to accelerate progress, okay, so this is not to say that all projects need to aspire to empower women. In fact, reaching or benefiting women may be perfectly reasonable as an intermediate objective in some contexts. If you're having trouble reaching women, you have to start there. But if we want to accelerate progress, then we need to be very clear about what it is we're trying to achieve and design a package of activities and interventions that make sense and measure the right things to assess impact. Now, of course, empowerment is a very complicated, multidimensional concept, but the good news is that we are getting better at measuring it. So IFPRI has co-developed a tool specifically to measure women's empowerment in agriculture called the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, the WEA, and it measures agency, so the ability to make strategic life choices. It's now been used by over 75 organizations in 50 countries. We're also developing a new version of the WEA for use in impact evaluations called the Project Level Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index that measures the 3 different types of agency. And so to sum up, I wanted to leave you with a simple formula. Clarity plus alignment equals our best chance for impact. So what do I mean by that? So clarity means we need to be clear. We need to know what are our pathways of influence, both the intended pathways and the unintended pathways. Where does gender fit in, and how does that matter? And once we figure that out, what is then our goal around gender? Are we trying to reach women? Are we trying to benefit women? Or are we trying to empower women? Alignment means that we need to have objective strategies, activities, and indicators that are consistent with each other. So if you're trying to do reach, measure reach. If you're trying to do benefits, measure benefits, and if you're trying to empower, measure empowerment. So finally, on impact, we need to be able to assess impact in a credible way by using rigorous methodologies and tools. If your goal is to provide equal benefits, you need to measure outcomes across the relevant groups, comparing across genders, across life cycles, across socioeconomic status. If you're aiming to empower women, measure empowerment using the tools like WEA. Report on what worked, what didn't work, and why. Let's not stop at just reporting impacts. We need to understand what are the mechanisms behind impact. And then let's learn from what doesn't work. Where are the bottlenecks? How do we relax constraints or work around them? And then finally, let's invest in what works. So based on our evidence, this should be the basis for making those investment decisions so that hopefully we can do a better job in addressing both gender and zero hunger and malnutrition. Thank you.